call for the City Council, please.
Council members Raymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Quintero.
Here.
And roll call for the Housing Authority.
Authority members Raymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Mincy.
Here.
Brazian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver. Chairman Najarian.
Here.
May we have your report?
Agenda for the June 16, 2009 joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, June 11, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. And before this joint meeting body is Director of Planning and of Public Works, General Manager of Glendale Water and Power, and Acting Director of Community Development and Housing regarding policy establishing priority for water and sewer service for affordable housing to lower income households as required by Government Code Section 65589.7. At 1A is a council resolution establishing a written policy.
Mr. Starbird.
Yes, Hassan, Director of Planning for the staff report.
Good afternoon, council members, members of the Housing Authority. As you see, this is just a required resolution. If staff is here to answer any questions if you'd like. If you'd like a short presentation, Laura Stotler can give you one. This is basically to give priority for these connections for affordable areas where affordable housing is located.
Mr. Mayor, it might be useful to note what gave rise to this, which was the approval of our housing element.
Correct. As part of the review of our housing element, the Housing Community Development Department of California identified a bill that was actually adopted in 2005 that requires us to have a written policy. All this does is write down and codify the policy we already have, where when a developer comes in, we work on them on a case-by-case basis to help them with water connections and sewer connections as well as other connections. So this is just writing down, memorializing what we already do.
I might add, kind of the subtext of this is in some communities back then there was a fear that through the extension of utility services you might place barriers for the development of affordable housing. This requires that you have straight-up policies to actually provide some priorities for affordable housing. We don't need priorities here because we accommodate them and, in fact, work for them, but in some communities that's not the case.
Move it.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Council members Raymond.
Yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Weaver. Mayor Quintero.
Yes, and I will move the item for the Housing Authority.
Second. Any discussion? Is there a Housing Authority item?
No, not on 1A.
Not on 1A.
No. 1A, General Counsel.
You start, Frank.
Okay.
Item 2 on the agenda, though, is Acting Director of Community Development and Housing and Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services regarding Shared Housing Program. This has actions actually for both bodies. And at 2A is Council motion to receive and file report and to provide direction to staff. And 2B is Authority motion to receive and file report and to provide direction to staff.
Mr. Duran.
Mr. Mayor Quintero, members of the City Council, and Chairman Najarian, members of the Glendale Housing Authority. What you have before you is an informational report regarding the concept of a shared housing program. We've completed some preliminary research, including identifying some of the pros and cons associated with implementing or administering such a program, and some examples of models that currently exist and operated in other communities such as Culver City, City of West Hollywood, the City of L.A., and the County of Los Angeles, and programs that were operated previously and discontinued, including our own program here in Glendale back in the late 80s, and also a program in Pasadena that they operated and discontinued. Some programs, as you'll note from the report, are run in-house, and some programs are contracted out to a nonprofit organization, and it appears that the leading and really the only nonprofit organization that is very qualified and that is working in the area of shared housing is the Alternative Living for the Aging organization in Los Angeles. A shared housing program in and of itself does represent a viable alternative to affordable housing, and especially for seniors if they can successfully be paired up. This report was prepared jointly between our department and the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Department, and together we've determined that if the City and the Housing Authority were interested in pursuing the development of a senior shared housing program, that it would best be suited managed by the Parks and Recreation Department and the Senior Services Program in Parks. Given that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter Zovak to provide you with more details regarding the report, if you are interested in hearing more before you begin your discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to hear a presentation.
Mr. Mayor, Chairman of the Housing Authority. Shared housing is generally described as an arrangement in which two or more unrelated people share a house or an apartment. In this particular case, you have two clients. You have the home provider, whether it's a single-family home that they own or an apartment that they are renting, and then a tenant or client looking for housing. Private sleeping quarters are made available to the individuals while the rest of the house is shared. Shared housing can occur naturally when you have two or more, or a group of people getting together and discussing and looking to pool their resources, or they may be developed through the guidance of an agency. And as Mr. Duran mentioned, the agency could be a city and or a nonprofit group. Shared housing is typically utilized by seniors who help to find living arrangements while remaining independent. Some of the benefits that we had found include creating affordable housing, provide some additional income for the participants, companionship, opportunities for support, whether it be emotional, physical, or social, and security. In the research, we did find that some agencies and cities were looking at some challenges that come about with shared housing programs. And those include liability, a lack of understanding of rental practices and contract management by clients, unequal expectations about caregiving, personality conflicts and involvement of non-resident family members. The City of Glendale previously offered this program from approximately 1985 to 1992 in the Parks Department under a program called Home Sharing. And the program was offered through the Senior Services Program. In that program, a community services coordinator conducted outreach to identify and introduce potential roommates. The coordinator offered quarterly social gatherings or mixers in the evenings to introduce these clients who wish to share their homes. Approximately 10 people attended each event, and staff helped make introductions and encourage conversation. Tenants were selected to either pay rent or perform housekeeping and or caregiving services in lieu of rent. The Glendale program at that time did not provide any background or reference checks on clients, and all due diligence was the responsibility of the two participants. When the coordinator left the city back in the 1990s, the position was not filled and the program was discontinued. We had difficulty finding any records of the program being that long ago, but staff recollections were that there were success stories with the program. Also, other recollections were that liability was becoming an issue associated with the program at that time, as there were some problems that naturally occurred between two people, particularly two people now coming together to be roommates in a living situation. Sometimes matches did not work out, and expectations between the two clients did not always match. Currently, the Housing Division and the Parks Department receive few inquiries related to actual shared housing services. Majority of the calls that are received are typically calls from seniors looking for affordable housing, not necessarily shared housing services. It's not to say that the demand is not out there once appropriate marketing is made. There are even fewer inquiries. We've asked a few of the senior case managers. There are typical inquiries made for affordable housing opportunities. There are even fewer inquiries that have been made by individuals who have a home and then are looking to share it with somebody else. So predominantly the calls are looking for just strictly affordable housing. Outside, as Mr. Duran mentioned, outside of Glendale, this service is provided by a number of cities that either directly operate the program or provide it through the use of a nonprofit. In this particular case, it's all been identified to be the same nonprofit, the Alternative Living for the Aging, out of Los Angeles. The cities that do operate a program are the cities of Culver City, and they have a program that runs approximately $57,000 a year annually. The city of West Hollywood has a program, approximately $16,000 that they operate. Los Angeles has a program in a limited area of Los Angeles, $49,000. The LA Community Development Commission, the LA County, operates a program just under $30,000. City of West Covina, and those 4 agencies mentioned all operate it through the nonprofit ALA. The City of West Covina operates their own program in-house, as well as the City of San Dimas. We found that the City of Pasadena previously offered a program, and they discontinued it due to liability concerns. As Mr. Duran mentioned, the determination that if the direction is to provide a program or look at providing a program, that it would best be suited, operated out of the Parks Department, simply because when in dealing with a senior population, the housing is just one of many issues that are being dealt with the senior population. So the senior case managers are trained to address a number of issues, and it had previously been operated out of their department as well. Some areas, if the direction is given to look at this a little bit further and provide some additional information on the program, some areas to research could include an assessment of the need for a program in Glendale, the scope and level of a shared housing program. By that we mean whether it is an in-house program, whether it is offered out through contract through a nonprofit agency, whether it's a trial basis, going to full implementation of a program, and then the level of program services that are being offered, whether we would be providing background checks, and the level of facilitation between the clients. Sources of funding to pay for staffing and operating the program is something that we would need to look at and report back to the Housing Authority on, as well as discussions with legal staff to address some of the potential liability concerns. Obviously, if some of the cities are operating that program, we've talked to them about liability concerns, and they've all mentioned numerous methods in which they feel comfortable in providing that service.
Mr. Starbird.
Well, Mr. Mayor, it's all of those things that caused me, as I was reading this report, to think that if we walk down this road, certainly one of the options we should evaluate is speaking to the alternative living for the aging group. They seem to run these. They do a number of them for some of the largest agencies, including the county and the city of Los Angeles. And, of course, that then helps shield you from a lot of the liability and even non-liability, but issues you'll run into with pairings that maybe don't work later on. That's not to say that would be the course to take, but it should certainly be one of the options that we'd want to get a proposal from them if you want to walk down this road any further.
Mr. Draymond.
Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Starbird, for making that comment, because I think that makes some sense to me. The reason I started asking for this is not necessarily because I think it is that I know it is, or even have a strong feeling that it is the right fit for Glendale. I don't know. But I do know that 17 years has elapsed, and we are in a remarkably different economy now. And even with the bad economy of the late 80s, early 90s, we didn't see the kinds of dynamics we are seeing now. And to me, the issue is more than just about, let's say, people who might be in need of affordable housing, but also, I mean, we have a lot of working class folks who are in a bind, and we have a lot of seniors in particular who are in a bind that need some assistance. So to the extent that we can pursue this a little further to get some assistance and direction from the very agency you're referring to and was mentioned by Peter and Jess in the report, it's in our report, I would like to see us pursue that. I'm not ready to commit the city to anything more than that, but I think with my vote, but I would like to pursue it, get a little more information, and see if it is indeed a fit. I also want to deal with something more concrete than people's recollections from 17 years ago, and yeah, we kind of think this, we kind of think that, especially when we can't really lay our hands on any documents, per se, from that time period. So.
Friedman and Mr.
I read the report fairly carefully, and I agree that it sounds like something that could be a real help to people, but my one and only concern, is sort of the cost-benefit analysis of it. And when I look at numbers like the grant for West Hollywood for ALA was almost $16,000, and they've placed 2 people. Culver City, almost $57,000, and they've placed 12 people. So when it does come back, I would love to see other options, because it seems to me like an awful lot of money for not a whole lot of people served, and I want to just be sure that there are not other options that, for the same amount of money could service more people. And also, I think that we need to also look at our available housing stock that would be available for sharing as opposed to some of these other cities. Do we actually have seniors living alone who have extra rooms or not? And I don't know if there's a way that we can tell that, what kind of the availability is before we go into contract with someone. And does ALA work by, do you sort of commit a certain amount of funding to them and then they use that to match, or do you pay per client served? Do you know?
We had some preliminary discussions with them, and they had heard that we were studying this, and they were hesitant to give us a proposal if the question were to come up at a meeting until they knew that there was at least an interest by the City Council. So they didn't necessarily want to quote a number. It seems, though, to staff that it is a number or a negotiated amount of a contract depending upon what some of the expectations are and services you wanted to provide within the community. There seem to be some cities in which ALA strictly seemed to operate, let's say, via telephone services. There were other cities in which the services where they physically came to the city on a set time frame, let's say weekly, with a set location in which these group introduction meetings took place on a regular basis. So it all depends on the scope.
Mr. Weaver.
I presume this is only staff time to go if we give direction to do so. Right?
At this point, yes.
I think it's worthwhile because over the years I've had seniors come to me trying to find, do I know a place where there's a spare room or an addition on the back? I can't pay rent alone. I'm looking for a place where I can live and rent out a room. So I think there's the need out there. I guess the toughest thing will be the matching. Trying to get two personalities that have never known each other all of a sudden together, assuming the right duties amongst them. But I'm willing to explore it and see. Because I think in our population there would be a significant base that might be interested.
I'm on the record multiple times as talking about moving in with Mr. Weaver.
Oh, gosh.
I'm talking about purchasing property in the same condominium projects. And
Same cemetery.
That's right. That's exactly right, Mr. Raymond. I forgot, same cemetery plots overlooking his. But,
We're just trying to figure out who moves in with who.
We'll get ALA to work with you.
Stack, you're over me, huh?
So anyway, but all kidding aside, I do think, this is worth pursuing. I think economically, perhaps we're going to serve some of our residents, and so Mr. Mincy followed by Mr. Raymond.
Peter, what in normal situation are they like splitting the rent? Normally, is the situation?
Depends. It depends.
You said it could be caregiver.
Exactly.
But let's say the rent, it'd have to be a two-bedroom, normally a two-bedroom apartment. So we're talking like at least $1,200 a month. Does that mean it'd be $600 plus utilities? That's
all
still
up for
not very low
negotiations.
income.
There was really not a set formula between the different cities and what eventually the clients agreed to.
For me, it would drive me crazy to share anymore. I mean, now I'm used to being alone. I like it. But it is, seniors are set in their ways. And I know there's an economic incentive, but it's also hard to, when there's not a romantic interest, it's sometimes, that's why on cruises I never have tried to, wouldn't want to share a cabin with someone I didn't like for the whole cruise. But it's worth checking, but on my case, pretty lukewarm.
We'll take you off the list, Mr. Mincy. Mr. Weaver on, Mr. Quintero on, Mr. Mincy off. Okay.
We're hoping we put Mr. Mincy with Mr. Quintero.
That's what I was just going to say.
That's out.
Peter, do you know, do we have any kind of figures or surveys. Glendale has a very large senior population. Some of the other cities you mentioned, where this is currently going on or has tried and they hasn't either succeeded or they've discontinued it for other reasons like liability and what have you. How do we stack up in comparison to those other cities in terms of just senior population? Because Glendale has, for a very, very long time, always had a very large senior population compared
Correct.
to many other cities.
I'd say that we're either equal to, or in some of the cities that were surveyed, have a larger senior population.
So it's possible there might be a larger need here. But also, and I think you alluded to it, it's not terribly surprising that we haven't had that many inquiries since we have not been promoting anything like it for starters, 17 years. And in terms of mixers and so on, there are other ways of doing it, and other cities do it differently, a variety of different ways. One other thing, sometimes what I hear and what I am approached is similar to what Mr. Weaver was describing. People who will tell me, I'll be approached by a couple of different seniors or by someone who will say, I have a friend, we'd like to share costs on a place, but we don't know how to go about it. We don't know we need some assistance finding a place. That is something that conceivably could be handled here too.
That is correct. Actually, that's another target group to identify. I had said that typically it's when one person already has a home and is looking to share. It could be the case where it's two people looking for a home in that particular instance.
That just needs some help locating the appropriate kind of an apartment or house or living situation, whatever it is. Anyway, without committing anything more than staff time at this time, Mr. Mayor, I'm supportive of getting more information, seeing what else is out there, what's been happening in the last 17 years, and seeing what might fit for Glendale.
What we could possibly be doing then is, through the senior case managers, start to maybe survey some of the seniors, ask what level of interest they would have if we were to offer such a program. Obviously, go back to ALA and talk to them a little bit more in-depth about a possible program here in Glendale and some of the parameters of that, and then again meet with the city attorney staff to address some of the liability issues.
Both at Central Park and up in the Montrose area, both of those senior centers, I think it'd be. Ms. Friedman?
I think within that analysis, we'd also need to find out kind of if we have both sides, if we have 1,000 people that are interested in us helping find them a place to move into, but also do we have that 1,000 people on the other side that are willing to offer the space to someone else? I think we need to kind of have a bit of a handle on that so that it's not just completely overwhelmed and kind of off balance. But I absolutely support looking into it.
Laura?
And I have a question. What's the only reason for this continuation of program? The coordinators leaving the city back in 90s?
I'm sorry, what?
Was the only reason for this continuation of program the coordinators leaving the city back in 90s?
Correct. The coordinator leaving the city had a lot to do with the program being discontinued. I think some other issues at that time, though, was the rising liability issue and maybe the lack of matches that were being made at that time. I think it was a combination, but I think the largest contributing factor was the coordinator leaving.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, any other comments? All right, I think you have enough direction.
Need a motion for council?
Yes, I do.
Or we just
There's a
send away
motion
with-
for both the council and the agency to receive the report and provide direction. I think we have
We have the direction. That direction is clear, so we need to receive and file the report.
Move to note and file the report.
You move
Shared
in,
housing
For
programs.
council.
and I'll second it.
Okay.
Or,
Council,
yeah, and what shall I go on with housing?
Let's
We have to take the roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry.
City Council.
Council members Draymond,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes.
For housing?
Second,
roll call.
Authority members Draymond,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Incy,
Yes.
Brosnan,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Chairman Najarian.
Yes.
What's next?
Is there a motion
I
to
just
adjourn?
wanted to thank staff for the report, and also thank my colleagues, Mr. Quintero and Mr. Najarian, for keeping this on the agenda.
All right, next, Mr. Kisaki.
Adjournment. Is there a motion for council and the authority?
To adjourn for council?
Second.
We are adjourned.
Move to adjourn for the housing.
Second.
Authorities adjourned.
All right, we'll call to order the joint public meeting of the Glendale